At 61 years old, I crossed an ocean to be close to my son. I cooked for his family every day. I woke up before dawn to get his children ready for school. I asked for nothing in return, only to be near him. And one night, at the dinner table, he looked at me and said I had become a weight in his house. The next morning, at 5:47 a.m., I closed his door behind me without saying a word. This is the story of what it cost me to understand that some people only miss you after you are already gone. Still remember the exact sound the door made when I closed it behind me. Not a slam. I didn't slam it. That's what people might expect. A dramatic exit, bags thrown, tears screaming down my face. But no, I closed it the way you close a door in a hospital at 2 a.m. Slowly, carefully. Like the sound itself would break something that was already broken. It was 5:47 a.m. I know because I checked my phone 3 times before I stood up from the couch where I had been sitting since 3 a.m., fully dressed, my one bag already packed. A brown leather bag, the same one I carried from Chennai 11 months ago, thinking I was coming to start something new, to help, to be useful, to be needed. I was 61 years old, and I had never felt smaller in my life. Let me go back, because if I start here, in that cold New Jersey morning with the smell of Rohan's kitchen still on my sari, you won't understand why those words destroyed me the way they did. You need to understand who I was before that night, who I thought I was. My name is Meena Krishnamurthy. I was a school teacher in Chennai for 26 years, Standard 5 and 6, mathematics and science. I knew every child's name in my classroom, every face, every small fear. I stayed late when children didn't understand. I bought pencils with my own money when parents couldn't afford them. I was not a woman who sat still. I was not a woman who needed to be taken care of. When my husband Venkat died in 2019, everyone told me the same thing. You'll be okay, Meena. You are a strong woman. And I believed them, because I had to. My daughter Priya was already married and settled in Bangalore. My son Rohan, my first child, my most loved child, I will not lie, had been living in the United States since 2009. Edison, New Jersey, a software engineer. Very successful, everyone in our neighborhood said. Meena's son in America. People said it the way they say the name of a god. When Venkat died, Rohan called me every Sunday, for a while. Then it became every other Sunday. Then it became, Amma, I'm so busy. I'll call when I can. I understood. He had a life. He had Deepa, his wife. He had 2 children. My grandchildren Arjun and little Kavya, whom I had only ever seen on video calls. Their faces pixelated on my phone screen, waving small hands at a grandmother they barely knew. When Rohan called me in February of last year and said, Amma, why don't you come stay with us for a while? The kids would love to see you. You've been alone too long. I cried. Right there on the phone. Happy tears. The kind you haven't felt in so long you almost forget what they taste like. I sold some of Venkat's jewelry. Not all of it, but enough. And I paid for my own ticket. I didn't want to be a burden. That was the word already living inside me before any of this began. Burden. As if I already knew what was coming and my body was trying to warn me. The first weeks were everything I had dreamed. Arjun, who is 9, showed me his Lego sets with the seriousness of a professor presenting research. Kavya, who was 5, decided I was her personal property and followed me from room to room. I cooked. God, I cooked. Sambar that took 3 hours. Pulikachal. Rohan's favorite. Avial, with the exact coconut ratio his grandmother used to make. The kitchen became mine in those first weeks, and I felt, for the first time in years, that I had a place in the world. I also helped with the children in the mornings. Deepa had a job, a good job, something in pharmaceutical sales, and she left early. Rohan left at 8. So I got the children ready for school. I made their lunches. I learned the American way they liked their sandwiches. Arjun wanted the crust cut off. Kavya needed her grapes sliced in half or she wouldn't eat them. Small things. I learned all of it. I did not complain about the cold. New Jersey in February is something my body had no preparation for. In Chennai, cold means wearing a light shawl. Here, cold meant a silence outside that felt almost violent. Like the air itself was warning you to stay inside. I wore 2 sweaters and still felt it in my fingers when I waited for the school bus with the children each morning. I did not complain. When Deepa mentioned, once gently, that the sambar smell was strong and her colleagues had asked if she'd been cooking at home, I started cooking with the window open. Even in the cold, I did not complain about that either. It was around the 6th week that things began to change. Not suddenly. The way a tide changes. So slowly you don't notice until you're standing in water up to your knees. Rohan started coming home later. 9, 10, sometimes 10:30. I kept his food warm. I sat with him while he ate, the way I always had when he was a boy. Just present, not asking too many questions, because I could see he was tired. But he stopped talking the way he used to. He stopped asking me about my day. He stopped asking about Chennai, about the neighbors, about Priya and her family. He looked at his phone while he ate. Once I asked him, "Rohan, are you okay? You seem stressed." He said, "I'm fine, Amma. Just work." And then he carried his plate to the sink. He didn't rinse it, just left it, and went upstairs. I rinsed it. I always rinsed it. Deepa was not unkind. I want to be clear about that. She was not cruel, but she had a way of making me feel invisible that was somehow worse than cruelty. She would walk into the kitchen while I was cooking and open the refrigerator and stare into it, as if I wasn't there. She would have conversations with Rohan about the children's schedules, about weekend plans, about money, never including me, never acknowledging that I was sitting 3 feet away on the same couch. Once she told Rohan, in English, which she knew I understood because I had been an English medium teacher, "We need to talk about the sleep schedule. Amma's been keeping Kavya up late, and she's exhausted in school." Kavya had asked me to tell her one more story. I had told her one more story. That was the crime. I said nothing. I learned to say nothing. I called Priya sometimes, late at night when the house was asleep. I sat in the small guest room, my room, which had a single window that looked out onto the back of another identical house, and I whispered to my daughter about small things. I didn't tell her the real things yet. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want to sound like a woman who couldn't handle her own life. "How is it, Amma? Are you happy there?" "It's nice, Kana. The children are wonderful." It was not a lie. The children were wonderful. Arjun had started teaching me how to play a video game I didn't understand, and his patience with me, his serious 9-year-old patience, undid me completely one afternoon. I cried in the bathroom afterwards, the good kind of cry. That was still enough. But then came the night of the parent-teacher conference. I was watching the children. Rohan and Deepa had both gone. The children were asleep by 8:30. I cleaned the kitchen, folded the laundry I'd washed that morning, and sat down to watch something on my phone with my earphones in. They came home at 10:15. I had already gone to my room. I always disappeared before they came back, because I had begun to sense that my presence in the living room in the evenings made something uncomfortable. I don't know what exactly. I just felt it the way you feel a change in weather before it comes. Their voices carried through the wall. I was not trying to listen, but my name stopped me. Rohan's voice, low and tired. "She means well, Deepa." "I know." Deepa's voice, sharper. "It's been 3 months, Rohan. 3 months. I don't have space to breathe in my own house. She's my mother. I know she's your mother. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm saying this isn't working. The kids are getting too attached. Kavya cried this morning because I packed her lunch instead of Amma. In my own house, I'm the stranger." A long pause. Then Rohan. "I'll talk to her." I sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were in my lap. I looked at them. The hands that had cooked for that house, folded that family's clothes, woken before dawn to make sure 2 children got on their school bus with warm stomachs. I told myself, it will be okay. He will talk to you. It will be a conversation. I believed that for exactly 3 more days, until the night he looked at me across the dinner table, his children between us, the television on in the background, and said, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with a tiredness that was almost worse, "Amma, you know we love you. But sometimes I feel like you've become a weight in this house. A weight. Not a mother, not a help, not a woman who had held this family together with her bare hands for 3 months. A weight." I looked at his face. He wasn't even watching me. He was looking at his plate. That was the last dinner I ate in his house. I didn't sleep that night, not even close. I lay in that small guest room with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle into its nighttime sounds, the hum of the heating system, Kavya turning in her bed in the room across the hall, the occasional car passing on the street outside. Sounds I had learned over 3 months. Sounds that had started to feel almost like home. And now I was listening to them like someone memorizing a place they know they'll never return to. A weight. The word didn't come in waves. It didn't hit me in bursts the way grief sometimes does. It just sat there, in the center of my chest, like a stone that had always been there, and I was only now noticing the weight of it. The irony was not lost on me. I was lying there feeling the weight of being called a weight. Venkat used to say, I thought too much. Meena, your brain doesn't have an off switch. He said it laughing, always laughing, because that was the kind of man he was. He could find something gentle in my worst qualities. I had been missing him steadily since he died, the way you miss a limb, not dramatically, not in collapse, but in 1,000 small moments where you reach for something and find only air. I reached for him that night, found only the cold wall beside my bed. I want to tell you something that I don't think people talk about enough when they talk about immigration and mothers and all of this. It is not the big moments that break you. It is not the cruel sentence, though that is what finally cuts the thread. It is everything that came before. The accumulation. The 100 small moments where you understood, slowly, that you had been invited to this house the way you invite a service, useful for a season, not meant to stay. Let me tell you about the small moments. The second week I was there, I reorganized the kitchen, just slightly, moved the spices to a lower shelf so I could reach them without a step stool because my back was already struggling with the cooking. I didn't throw anything away. I didn't change anything dramatic, just the spices. Deepa came home, opened the cabinet, and stood there for a moment without saying anything. Then she moved everything back, without a word to me. She didn't say, please put things back. She just erased what I had done. Like I hadn't done it. I understood the message. The third week, I asked Rohan if he wanted me to help with grocery shopping. I had seen the prices in that supermarket, the Stop and Shop on Oak Tree Road, and I knew certain things were cheaper at the Indian grocery store 2 miles away. I had mapped it on my phone. I was ready to walk if needed, though Rohan would never have let me. He said, it's okay, Amma. Deepa has a system. A system. I went back to my room and sat with that word. A system. As if I was a disruption to a machine that was running fine before I arrived. The 5th week, a Saturday, Deepa's mother visited. Her name was Sulachana, a woman my age, well-dressed, confident, the kind of woman who fills a room. She arrived with a store-bought cake and a bottle of wine, and Deepa lit up in a way I had not seen since I arrived. The two of them sat at the kitchen island, laughing, talking about people I didn't know, shows I hadn't watched. Rohan joined them, relaxed, his shoulders down, his phone face down on the table for once. I sat in the living room with the children. I helped Kavya with her coloring book. I listened to the laughter from the kitchen. No one called me to join them. No one brought me tea. After Sulachana left that evening, Deepa was softer, almost warm. She showed me photos on her phone from when Rohan and Deepa first got married. There were a few photos of me in there from the wedding in Chennai 12 years ago. I looked at my own face in those photos, younger, standing next to Venkat, both of us dressed in our best, proud, so proud of this son who had built a life in America. You looked so beautiful, Amma, Deepa said, and I think she meant it, in that moment. People can mean things and still do what they do. That is one of the most difficult lessons life teaches. By the 8th week, I had found my own rhythm. I woke at 5:30. I made coffee. I had learned finally to use their complicated machine, and I sat at the kitchen table alone for 40 minutes before anyone else was awake. That was my time, the only time in that house that felt entirely mine. I wrote letters to Priya during those mornings. Not emails, real letters, on the small notepad I'd bought at the drugstore on the corner, the one with the yellow pages. I didn't send most of them. I just wrote them. It was a way of hearing my own voice, I think, of reminding myself that I had one. Dear Priya, today Kavya told me I make the best idli in the whole world, better even than school lunch, which apparently is very high praise. I keep thinking about what Amma used to say, that love lives in food. I think she was right. I think that's where I've been putting mine. I wrote that on a Tuesday morning in the 4th week. I kept that letter. I still have it. Some mornings I would walk after dropping the children at the bus stop, just 20 minutes, sometimes 30. The neighborhood was the kind of American neighborhood that looks the same in every direction. Large houses, wide driveways, basketball hoops in front, cars that cost more than I would earn in 5 years of teaching. Beautiful in a hollow way, like a photograph of comfort rather than comfort itself. I would walk, and I would think about Chennai, about the noise of it, the auto rickshaws, the vegetable sellers in the morning, the specific smell of rain on hot asphalt, the sound of temple bells at dawn. I had lived in that city for 61 years. Every street had a memory attached to it. Here, every street looked like every other street, and none of them knew my name. The loneliness was not what I expected. I had expected to miss people. I did miss people. My sister Kamala, my old colleague Padma, the neighborhood women I had known for decades. But the loneliness I felt in that New Jersey house was different. It was the loneliness of being surrounded by people who loved each other and having no place inside that love, being close enough to feel the warmth and far enough to remain cold. Rohan tried. I want to be fair to him. There were moments, Sunday mornings sometimes, when Deepa took the children to her gym, when he would sit with me over coffee and be for a little while my son again. He would ask about people back home. He would laugh at things I said. He would show me something on his phone, a news article, a cricket score, the way he used to as a teenager sitting beside me on the veranda. Those moments I held on to with both hands, but they were becoming rarer, and I could feel him retreating even during them, his eyes going to his phone, his responses shortening, some other part of his mind already somewhere else. He was a busy man. I understood that. I told myself I understood that. What I could not understand, no matter how many times I tried, was how he could not see what was happening, how he could look at his mother, a woman who had crossed an ocean, who had adjusted her entire self to fit inside his life, who cooked and cleaned and cared for his children and asked for nothing in return except to be near him, and call her a weight. Unless, and this thought came to me in the middle of that sleepless night and would not leave, unless he had stopped seeing me as his mother somewhere along the way, unless I had become, gradually in his mind, exactly what Deepa saw, an inconvenience wearing a familiar face. At 3 a.m., I sat up. I didn't make a dramatic decision. It wasn't like that. It was more like clarity, the kind that only comes after a long time of refusing to see something clearly. I thought about my ticket. It was an open return. I had not booked the return date because Rohan had said, when I came, "Stay as long as you want, Amma. As long as you want." I turned on my phone. I went to the airline website. My fingers moved on the screen with a steadiness that surprised me. I found a flight, Chennai via London, departing Newark at 9:40 a.m. It was 3:17 a.m. I would need to leave for the airport by 6. I booked the seat. I watched the confirmation arrive in my email. I read it twice. Then I got up quietly and I packed my brown leather bag. It didn't take long. I had never fully unpacked. Some small surviving part of me had kept things ready, as if it knew, even when I didn't. I packed my saris, my medicines, my small bag of toiletries, the notepad with Priya's unread letters. I took nothing from that house that was not mine. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for morning. I thought about leaving a note. I wrote 3. I threw them all away. What could I possibly say? You called me a weight, so I have removed myself. I hope the house feels lighter now. No. Some things are better said in silence. Some exits are more powerful than any words. I had spent 61 years explaining myself, justifying my presence, making myself smaller so others could feel larger. Not this morning. This morning, I would simply be gone. At 5:47, I picked up my bag. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Kavya's door was slightly open. It was always slightly open. She was afraid of the dark, and every night I was the one who checked it before I went to sleep. I pushed it gently, just to look at her one more time. She was curled on her side, one arm around the stuffed elephant I had brought from Chennai. His name was Gajapati. She had named him herself. Her face in sleep was so open, so completely trusting. 5 years old, and the world had not yet taught her to close herself. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I closed her door, slowly, carefully, and I walked to the front door, and I closed that one too. The Uber driver's name was Mohammed. I know because I stared at his name on my phone screen for the entire 6 minutes. I stood outside Rohan's house waiting for him, my brown bag at my feet, the cold of that New Jersey morning pressing against every part of me that my 2 sweaters couldn't cover. It was the kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin. It gets inside your breathing, makes each inhale feel like a small effort. Mohammed arrived in a gray Honda. He didn't say much. He confirmed my destination, Newark Liberty International, and then he drove, and I sat in the back seat watching Rohan's neighborhood disappear behind me. The identical houses, the basketball hoops, the wide, quiet driveways. I didn't look back. I want to say I didn't look back because I was strong. The truth is simpler. There was nothing to look back at. The house was dark. Everyone was asleep. No one was standing at the window watching me leave. No one even knew I was gone yet. That was perhaps the loneliest part of the whole thing, not the leaving itself, the fact that my leaving made no immediate disturbance, like dropping a stone into water and watching the surface stay still. Newark Airport at 6 in the morning has a specific kind of energy, tired people moving with purpose, dragging things behind them, coffee cups in hand, faces not yet arranged for the day. I fit in perfectly. I checked in at the counter. The woman was efficient, professional, barely glanced at me, and I paid the baggage fee with the credit card I kept for emergencies. I had decided, sometime during those sleepless hours, that this counted as an emergency. I went through security. I found my gate. I sat down in a row of gray chairs facing a large window, and I watched planes on the tarmac in the early light, and for a long time, I didn't think about anything at all. My mind had gone somewhere quiet, not peaceful exactly, but emptied. The way a room looks after everything has been moved out of it. Bare walls, clean floors, all the furniture of feeling temporarily gone. I bought a chai from a small cafe near the gate. It was nothing like chai. It was hot brown water with a vague sweetness, but I held the cup with both hands and I drank it slowly, and I let it be enough. It was on the plane, somewhere over the Atlantic, that I finally cried. Not the way I expected. I had been bracing for it. The heaving, uncontrollable kind. The kind that embarrasses you in public and frightens the person in the next seat. But it came quietly. The way rain sometimes begins without you noticing until your shoulders are already wet. I was watching nothing. The seatback screen was off. The window shade was half down. The man beside me was asleep. And suddenly my face was wet, and I was pressing the small square airline napkin against my eyes and shaking, very slightly, in a way I hope no one saw. I cried for Venkat first. I always come back to Venkat when things fall apart. He is the fixed point, the grief that contains all other grief. I thought about what he would have said if he had been alive to see this. He would not have said, "I told you so." He was never that kind of man. He would have made tea and sat beside me and let the silence do the work. Then I cried for Kavya and her stuffed elephant and the way she said my name, Pati, with both syllables equally weighted, like a small song. I cried thinking about her waking up and coming to my room and finding the bed made and the room empty. I hoped Rohan would explain it gently. I hoped he would find the right words. Then I thought about Rohan having to find the right words, and I felt something that was not quite anger and not quite pity, something in between, something I had no name for. I cried for the kitchen I had cooked in every day for 3 months, for the specific quality of morning light that came through the window above the sink, for the sound of Arjun's school bag hitting the floor when he came home, for the small routines I had built inside someone else's life, the careful architecture of my own belonging, dismantled now as if it had never existed. Then I dried my face. I folded the napkin. I put it in the seat pocket in front of me, and I looked out the half-open window at the absolute dark of the ocean below, and I thought, you are going home. I had not called Priya. This was deliberate. I knew that if I called her before I left, she would ask questions, and questions would unravel me, and I needed to hold myself together long enough to get on that plane. I also knew, and this is harder to admit, that I was ashamed, not of leaving, of what had made me leave, of the sentence that was still living in my chest. You've become a weight in this house. Saying it out loud to Priya would make it more real. So I sent her a message, somewhere over Ireland. The plane's Wi-Fi working just well enough. Kanna, I'm coming home. Landing in Chennai tomorrow evening. We'll explain everything. Don't worry. I am fine. She called immediately. 12 missed calls in the time it took me to put my phone away and close my eyes. When I turned it back on an hour later and saw those 12 missed calls, I felt for the first time since leaving something close to warmth. Someone was disturbed by my absence. Someone had noticed I was gone. I texted back, on the plane. Will call from London layover. I love you. The London layover was 4 hours. Heathrow is enormous and I had never been there before. I had flown directly Chennai to New York when I came, a different route. I followed the signs with the careful attention of a woman who could not afford to get lost, and I found my connecting terminal, and I found a restaurant that served actual tea, real tea, and I sat at a small table alone, and I ordered a pot and a sandwich I didn't finish, and I did something I had not done in 3 months. I sat in public alone, and felt no need to explain myself, no need to be quieter than I naturally was, no need to measure my footsteps, my cooking smells, my voice, my presence, no need to fold myself into a smaller shape to fit inside someone else's idea of how much space I was allowed to take up. I spread my elbows on that small Heathrow table, such a small thing, such an enormous relief. I called Priya. She answered before the first ring finished. Amma, what happened? What happened? Tell me right now. Her voice broke something open in me. That's what mother-daughter love does. It finds the cracks you've been holding closed with pure effort, and it reaches right in. I told her. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. I told her about the 3 months, about the kitchen reorganized and then unreorganized, about the dinners eaten in near silence, about Deepa's mother visiting and the laughter I had listened to from the other room, about the parent-teacher conference night, about the wall, about the wait. Priya was quiet for a long time after I said that word. Then, Amma, just that, my name in my daughter's voice, with everything she couldn't say inside it. I'm okay, I told her. I'm okay. I was not entirely okay, but I was more okay than I had been at 3 a.m. in that guest room. I was moving. I was going somewhere. I was no longer sitting still inside someone else's silence. Rohan called at 9 a.m. London time. I stared at his name on my phone screen for a long time. Then I answered. Amma. His voice was different from Priya's. Tighter. Something between worry and something else I couldn't name yet. Where are you? I came downstairs and... Amma, what happened? Why didn't you say anything? I thought carefully before I spoke. I didn't want to wake anyone, I said. A long pause. You didn't want to. Amma, you can't just leave like that, without telling anyone. Kavya is asking for you. She's been crying since she woke up. I closed my eyes. Kavya's face in sleep. Gajapati the stuffed elephant. Tell her Pati had to go home, I said. Tell her Pati will call her. Amma? Why? We can talk about this. If you were unhappy... Rohan. My voice was calm. Calmer than I expected. You said what you said. I heard what I heard, and I thought, if I am a weight, then the right thing to do is to remove myself. So I did. Another long pause. I heard him breathing. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, that long, honest, uncomfortable silence, I understood something important. He didn't have an answer. There was no version of that sentence that meant something other than what it meant. He knew it. I knew it, and now we both knew the other one knew it. I'll come to Chennai, he said finally. In a few weeks. I'll come and we'll talk properly. Okay, I said. Amma, I'm sorry. I held the phone. I looked out the window of that Heathrow restaurant, at the gray English sky, at the planes lined up on the tarmac, at all those people going somewhere. I know, I said. And then, because I was 61 years old, and I had learned finally that some conversations need to end before they start going in circles. My flight is boarding soon. I'll call when I land. The flight from London to Chennai was 9 hours. I slept for 4 of them. Real sleep, the kind I hadn't managed in weeks, the kind that comes when your body finally believes it is safe to let go. When I woke up, we were somewhere over the Middle East, the map on the screen showing our small plane-shaped arrow crossing over familiar latitudes, moving steadily toward a city that knew my name. I thought about what I was returning to. My apartment in Chennai, small, neat, exactly as I had left it, with Venkat's photograph on the shelf and my books and the particular smell of my own kitchen. My sister Kamala, who lived 12 minutes away and with whom I had spoken almost every day of my adult life. My colleague Padma, who would insist on feeding me the moment she heard I was back. The auto rickshaw driver Murugan, who had driven me to school for 11 years and always asked about my students. People who did not need me to be smaller. People who did not calculate how much space I was using. I thought about the school. I had retired, yes, but they had been asking me to come back part-time to help the new mathematics teacher who was struggling with the upper standards. I had said no when I left for America. I had thought, I won't be needed there. I'll be needed here. Now I thought, maybe I'll say yes. We landed in Chennai at 7:40 in the evening. The air hit me when they opened the doors to the jetway. Warm, thick, alive with the particular smell of that city. A smell I cannot describe to someone who doesn't know it. A combination of rain and earth and something organic and specific that lives only here. My body recognized it before my mind did. My shoulders dropped. My breathing changed. I walked through the terminal. I collected my brown bag from the belt. I walked through the arrivals gate. Priya was standing there. She was holding a small paper sign, the way you see people hold signs for strangers. Except on it, she had written, in large letters, in Tamil, Yenamma, my mother. I stopped walking. She saw my face, and her face did the same thing mine was doing. And we stood there for a moment on either side of that arrivals gate, two women who loved each other across every distance. And then she crossed the space between us and put her arms around me, and I pressed my face into her shoulder, and finally, I let myself fall apart completely. I've got you, she said, in Tamil, in the voice she had when she was small and frightened, and I used to say the same words to her. Amma, I've got you. Priya had cleaned my apartment before I arrived. I don't know when she found the time. She had driven 2 hours from Bangalore with her husband Suresh, who waited in the car while she came inside with me, understanding, without being told, that this first moment needed to belong only to us. She had swept the floors, opened the windows to let the evening air through, placed a small vase of marigolds on the kitchen table. Venkat's photograph on the shelf had been dusted. A fresh garland of jasmine hung over his frame. I stood in the doorway of my own home, and I couldn't move for a moment. 11 months. I had been gone 11 months, counting the weeks before America when I was preparing, selling jewelry, packing, dreaming. 11 months of making myself fit inside other people's spaces. And now here was my space. Modest, familiar. Every corner holding some memory of a life I had actually built, and it received me without condition, without calculation, without measuring how much room I required. I set my brown bag down. I took off my sandals. I walked to the kitchen, and I put my hands flat on the counter, and I stood there for a long moment, feeling the specific coolness of that stone surface, which I had stood at 10,000 times, which knew the shape of my palms. Sit, Priya said from behind me. I'm making tea. I sat. I let my daughter make me tea in my own kitchen. I watched her move through that space with the easy familiarity of a child who had grown up in it, reaching for things in the right places, knowing without asking where the cardamom was kept, filling the pot with the exact amount of water our family had always used. She had her father's hands, I noticed again. Long fingers, quick movements. I pressed my eyes shut for just a moment. Venkat, look at her. Priya stayed for 4 days. We didn't talk about Rohan constantly. She had the wisdom not to make those 4 days entirely about him, to let me simply exist in my home and recover my sense of myself before we picked up the hard things and examined them. We cooked together. We watched an old Tamil serial she found on her phone that I had apparently missed 6 months of. We walked in the evening to the temple at the end of the road, the one I had gone to every Tuesday for 30 years, and I stood before the deity with no particular prayer formed, just presence, just arrival. I'm back. I'm here. That's enough. My sister Kamala came on the second day. She brought her particular brand of love, which has always expressed itself through aggressive feeding and zero tolerance for self-pity. She sat across from me, waited until I had eaten 2 servings of the pongal she'd brought, and then said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Leave nothing out." So I told it again. The whole story, this time to someone who had known me my entire life, who remembered my mother and my wedding and the night Rohan was born, and every version of me that had existed before the one sitting across from her now. Telling it to Kamala was different from telling it to Priya. Priya listened with her heart. Kamala listened with her whole history of knowing me, and when I reached the part about the weight, that word, Kamala set down her coffee cup with a precision that meant she was controlling herself. He said that. She was quiet for a very long time. Then, Venkat would have been devastated. I know, not angry, devastated, because he raised that boy to be better. I nodded. That was exactly it. Not fury, but a deeper, sadder thing. The gap between the person you raised and the person they became inside a life you weren't part of. The ways America had changed my son that I hadn't been present to witness. The gradual replacement of certain values with certain efficiencies. The way comfort can quietly erode gratitude if no one is paying attention. I didn't say this to excuse him. I said it to understand him. Understanding is not the same as forgiving. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. Padma came on the third day. She arrived with her usual energy. Loud, generous, impossible to feel sorry for yourself around for extended periods. She had brought 2 of the younger teachers from school, women I barely knew, and they all sat in my living room and they talked to me like I was a person with a full life and a future, not a wounded woman who needed to be handled carefully. "We need you back," Padma said directly halfway through the visit. "Ravi is drowning in Standard 6. The children have started drawing his portrait on the board when he turns around. It's not kind, but it's accurate." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. The first real laugh since, I couldn't remember. "Part-time," I said. "Whatever you want. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Done." It was that simple. I had been afraid, I realized, of returning to an emptied life. The life of a widow alone in an apartment with too many quiet hours. What I found instead was a life that had been waiting for me, patiently, holding my place. The school, the temple, Kamala, Padma, the auto rickshaw driver Murugan, who, when I called to book a ride for the following Monday, said, "Madam, you're back. How was America?" With such uncomplicated happiness that I laughed again. "Cold," I told him. "Very cold." Rohan called every day that first week. The calls were awkward in the beginning. Too much silence, too many sentences that started and stopped. He asked about my flight, about the apartment, about Priya's visit. He told me Kavya had cried for 2 days and then had decided, with the pragmatic resilience of a 5-year-old, that Pati lived in the phone now, which was somehow both heartbreaking and wonderful. "She talks to your photo," he said, "on my phone background. She says goodnight to it." I pressed my hand over my mouth for a moment. "Tell her Pati says goodnight back," I said, every night. On the 5th day, he said the thing he had been building toward all week. I could feel it coming. A different quality to his silence. A preparation. "Amma," what I said. The weight thing. A long pause. I've been trying to understand why I said it. I've been thinking about it every day. And I think I was tired. Not of you. I was tired of everything. Work. Deepa and I were going through a hard time, the kids' schedules, everything, and instead of dealing with any of that, I put it somewhere it didn't belong. On you. I listened. "That doesn't make it okay," he said quickly. "I know that. I know it doesn't." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. I'm sorry, Amma. I am genuinely, completely sorry. You came to help us. You helped us every day, and I failed you." I sat with that for a moment. My son saying I failed you. I had waited, I realized, not for the apology exactly. Apologies are words and words are easy, but for this, for evidence that he understood the specific nature of what he had done. Not that he had hurt my feelings, that he had looked at his mother and seen a burden. "I know you're sorry," I said. "I believe you. Can we? I want to fix this, Amma. Things don't get fixed quickly, Rohan. You know that. I know. But they can get better, slowly, if people are honest. I want to come to Chennai, in December, me and the kids. Kavya needs to see you. Arjun has been very quiet about the whole thing, which worries me more than crying would. Arjun, serious, 9-year-old Arjun, who had taught me his video game with the patience of a professor. I felt that in my chest. "Come in December," I said. "You're always welcome in my home." I meant the distinction, not come to my house. He had one of those. My home, where I was the one who decided how the spices were arranged. Deepa called on the 9th day. I had not expected that. I will be honest. I had not thought of Deepa as someone who would call. I had thought of her as someone who would be relieved by my absence and move forward without looking back, the way people do when an uncomfortable situation resolves itself. But she called. A Tuesday morning, while I was sitting with my tea before school. Amma. Her voice was careful. Rehearsed, maybe. But underneath the care, something real. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now. I understand if you don't want to talk. But I needed to. I needed to say that I know things were not right. When you were here, I know I made it harder than it should have been. I was quiet. I've been thinking about the kitchen, she said. The spices. I moved them back and I don't know why I did that. You were just trying to be comfortable. It was your home too. While you were there, it should have been. Deepa, I'm not a bad person, she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I know how it must have looked. I know how I must have seemed. But I was scared. I know that sounds strange. What was there to be scared of? But you were. You were so good with the children. And sometimes I felt like I was disappearing inside my own house. And instead of talking to Rohan about that, I made you the problem, when you weren't the problem. I sat with that for a long time. Here is what I have learned, at 61, after a life of teaching children how to think, and not just what to think. People are almost never simple. Deepa was not simply a cold woman who wanted me gone. She was a woman working a demanding job, managing a household, feeling invisible inside a marriage that had its own fractures, and she had chosen the wrong solution to a real problem. That doesn't dissolve my pain, but it changes the shape of it. Thank you for calling, I said. It means something that you called. I'm going to try to be better, she said. When you come back, if you come back, I'll come back, I said. Not to stay, but to visit, to see the children. I'm their Pati. Yes, she said, and something in her voice shifted, something that sounded unexpectedly like relief. I started back at school on a Monday. Murugan picked me up at 8:15, exactly as he had for 11 years. He asked about America the whole drive, genuinely fascinated. The cold, the food, the enormous roads, the size of the supermarkets. I told him about Stop and Shop, about the 15 different kinds of cereal, about the snow that had come in March, 2 feet of it, and how I had watched it from the window like it was a television program. He laughed. And you prefer this madness? He said, gesturing at the Chennai traffic, horns, autos, a vendor pushing a cart of coconuts directly into our lane. Completely, I said. The classroom smelled the same as it always had. Chalk and old wood and something indefinably specific to this room, this school, these walls, where I had spent 26 years. Standard 6 sat before me. 28 children, small faces, some curious, some already calculating whether this substitute was manageable. I stood at the board and I wrote my name, the way I had on the first day every year. Mrs. Meena Krishnamurthy. A girl in the front row raised her hand immediately. Are you the mathematics teacher? I am. Ravi sir said fractions were easy, she said, with the specific indignation of a child who has been failed by an adult's optimism. They are not easy. No, I agreed. They are not easy, but they are learnable. Everything is learnable if someone explains it properly. I turned to the board. I began. There is one more thing I need to tell you. About a month after I came home, I was going through my brown leather bag, the one I had packed in the dark at 5 a.m. in New Jersey, and I found, tucked into the small inside pocket, something I hadn't put there. A drawing, crayon on the back of a piece of printer paper. A woman in a purple sari, my saris are often purple, standing in a kitchen. Around her, yellow marks that I slowly understood were meant to be the smell of cooking. Beside the woman, a small figure with 2 pigtails holding the woman's hand. In the corner, in the careful, large handwriting of a 5-year-old. I love Pati. Kavya must have slipped it into my bag at some point. Days ago, weeks ago, I didn't know when. Before things changed, before that night, before any of it. She had put her love in my bag without telling me, the way children do. Simply without strategy, without any concept that love might need to be demonstrated or defended. I sat on my kitchen floor with that drawing in my hands, and I cried in a way I had not yet cried through any of this. Not with grief, with the complicated, piercing fullness of understanding that love does not always come from where you expect it, does not always speak in the language you were listening for, does not always announce itself at the door. Sometimes it is already in your bag. You just have to get home to find it. I am 61 years old. I have buried a husband and raised 2 children and taught mathematics to hundreds of others. I have cooked for people who didn't thank me and cleaned kitchens that weren't mine and crossed an ocean believing I was needed and come home understanding that I was always enough, with or without anyone's need of me. I am not a weight. I am a woman with heavy enough roots that no one else's careless words can uproot me for long. I pinned Kavia's drawing above my kitchen window. Every morning when I make my tea, I see it. The purple sari, the yellow smell of cooking, the small hand holding mine. I love Pati. Yes, Kana. Pati loves you too, more than you will ever know.